Death is inevitable. You know that, I know that, everybody knows that somebody's going to die every day, one day. So, while death is never a comfortable subject to talk about, nobody wants to die unless you have a mental condition, I guess. But today I want to start out by telling you a little story about my grandmother and the situation in which she was put in. And so when I was 6 years old, she was 89, and she had been taking medication for many strokes that she'd been having, and she hadn't had one in months. And so she was leaving Walmart at night, and she got hit by a semi. And she was pronounced dead on the scene, but they brought her back. And so she got hit on a Tuesday, and as soon as my mom heard about this, her and my sister drove up to Nebraska where she lived, and she told me that I couldn't go because she didn't want me to see my grandma as this person who got put in a coma and a very weak and fragile. She wanted me to remember her as a very fun-loving, energetic 89-year-old, as hard as that sounds to seem, or as hard as that seems to understand. But she wanted me to remember her as the fun-loving grandmother that I loved and not a fragile woman who had just been devastatedly hit by a semi. And while after a week in a coma, she was stuck there, and my mom and her 6 older brothers decided to finally take her off life support. And after an hour, she passed away. And while I hope that nobody in this audience ever has to be put in that situation, to be put in a situation where you have to make that decision whether or not to take somebody off life support, physician-assisted suicide is something that is a similar case, but not exactly like that. So today, I'm here to inform you on how costly and painful not allowing physician-assisted suicide is, why it's illegal still, and how we need to institute the laws. And so now, I want to talk a little bit about the cost and pain. I want you to think about if you're a 23-year-old person, newly married, but you go in for a regular doctor checkup and they tell you you have an inoperable brain tumor. You're going to die in less than a year. Newly married, wanting to start a family, and you get hit with that. You have a million questions racing throughout your mind. I just want you to understand, would you want to live your life, your remaining year of your life, would you want to live that way? In a hospital, racking up medical bills, because we all know hospital bills are very expensive, treatments are very expensive, we all know this. Would you want to live quality or quantity of life? Would you want to be a former shell of yourself for 5 years, or would you want to be your full best self for a year? And in a 2014 article, Brittany's Choice, she chose quality. While she has now become the spokesperson over the past year, she's now become the spokesperson for quality over quantity, and for choosing physician-assisted suicide. And so, we all know somebody who's been affected by cancer. I mean, Mr. Strathman, recently, he got affected by cancer, and so far he's doing well, but in a more dire case where it's further along in cancer, it is very painful. Chemo treatments are very painful, and you basically have no energy to do what you love to do throughout your life. So what kind of a life really is that if you can't choose to end your life with dignity? And so now you know why it's hurting people and how it's hurting people, you can now understand how it's going to be illegal, or how it is illegal. According to James Pindocleram in his 11th and 41st volume of Physicians Involved in Physician-Assisted Suicide, the morality of the Hippocratic Oath, which all doctors take when they're enshrined into be a doctor, when they get their MD, it should be enough to be just on the morality of allowing your patient to serve them. And so a quote from the Hippocratic Oath is, "I will remember that I do not treat a fever chart, a cancerous growth, but a sick human being, whose illness may affect the person's family and economic stability. My responsibility includes these related problems, if I am to care adequately for the sick." And what that quote is saying is basically saying, if I'm truly going to help treat somebody, how can I do that knowing if they can't pay for that, their family is going to be burdened with that for the rest of their life? And it's basically saying they need to take into consideration their patient's well-being overall and their family more than just their patient or their own morality. And so, when you also think about doctors' percentages, you think about the way their perception, a lot of what goes against physician-assisted suicide is lots of doctors believe that it's against their own morality or religion to allow somebody to commit suicide. And while you can see here that it is in emergency medicine, 60% of people believe that it should be and 9% are undecided. In every single category, there are more people that say yes than there are that say no. I think that should speak a lot to how even doctors believe that it should be allowed, more than just the politicians that believe that it shouldn't because it goes against moral philosophy. And so, if a doctor doesn't allow, so right now, or according to Kathy Gulu in the magazine Closing Arguments, recent public polls have forced states into talking about this in their own legislature. And so, the most recent being Hawaii, one of only 7 states that have this legalized. Hawaii decided to institute a policy in which the doctors directly aren't giving euthanasia, which is you directly insert the drugs into them, so it's more of a lethal injection, but they give them certain pills that they can take to end their life on their own terms, instead of staying in a hospital and having to wait there until it's gone. And while a lot of arguments against this go towards the slippery slope point, they're saying if you legalize this for them to kill themselves, it's not just a willy-nilly thing. They don't just go, I want to kill myself because I'm terminally ill. No, they have to give physical evaluations in 3 different aspects. They have to give psychological evaluation, they have to give a physical evaluation, and they have to give the previous personal backgrounds into consideration before giving them the certain pills. And so, when you think about that, there are 7 legal states right now, and on the legislature there are 13 new ones that are projected to talk about it within the next year and try and legalize it. And so, right now, you see that it's not a direct process. So you see the annual number of requests for psychiatric disease or weary of life, you see that's very low. And when you see the annual number of granted requests, there's absolutely 0. If you have any sign of mental capacity that does not allow you to choose the proper ways to live your life, or end your life in this case, they don't allow you to do that. You have to have proper sound mind, and it has to be in specific cases where you are terminally ill, given a specific amount of time to live, where you don't want to rack up medical bills and rack up debt like that. And so, today, I provided you info on how costly and painful treatments can be if you're not allowed to commit physician-assisted suicide, why it is illegal, and how we need to institute laws. And so, I hope today that I have persuaded you enough that you will reconsider and allow or endorse the legalization of physician-assisted suicide. And as in the intro, you may be a little bit uncomfortable with death, but a dying person has a million questions running through their head. So I just want you to think about their perspective. 23 years old, diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer. What would you want to do with your life? Thank you.